Laura.
I have a guest in studio tonight, and you would notice that there is no preamble. That is because whatever I am going to talk about this evening is so important, is so grave, that I have dedicated this entire show to discussing that. I have dealt with it before, and I will continue to deal with it because this particular issue is very important to me. Extremely important to me. Not because I have kids, but because every single child in this country is the responsibility of every adult in this country. You would remember time gone by when the old adage was commonplace on every tongue. It takes a village to raise a child. 6 days ago, that would have been last week, Wednesday, we observed World Children's Day. World Children's Day was established in 1954 as Universal Children's Day and is celebrated on the 20th of November every year to promote international togetherness, awareness among children worldwide, and improving children's welfare. November 20th has other significance, great significance as well for us, because it is the date in 1959 when the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. It is also the date in 1989 when the UN General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Since 1990, Children's World Day also marks the anniversary of the date that the UN General Assembly adopted both the Declaration and the Convention of Children's Rights. World Children's Day offers each and every one of us an inspirational entry point to advocate for, promote, and celebrate children's rights, translating into dialogues and actions that will build a better world for children. Now, this year actually is the 30th anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And to my mind, it's a time to celebrate and demand action for children's rights. Now, some of the older folks, even those in my generation, some people in my generation would say, rights of a child, ki rights child. Rights ti mamay, se pou koute mamay, koute papay, ek fesa yo di pou fe. As if children are not human beings, they are not persons, they don't have feelings, they have no care in the world. You could tell them what you want and they're to absorb it, or rather not absorb it, but to let it flow off their back like water off a duck's back. That they're not supposed to have any emotions. They're not supposed to cry or hurt, feel joy, pain, sorrow, nothing like that. They're just supposed to be submissive and to do your exact bidding, but that is not so. Children are human beings just like us, and sometimes I wonder whether adults have ever grown up, because their behavior sometimes is so juvenile that it begs the question, did you ever grow up? Did you ever grow up? Where is the social skills that you were supposed to have developed over the years? Where is the maturity that you were supposed to have developed over the years? And when you see some adults' behavior towards children, you understand why they behave the way they do It's because they are devoid of any social, of any emotional growth or maturity. They were never given the opportunity to. And it opens the door wide for a spectrum of unbecoming behavior, not only from them, but heaped on them. This evening, my special guest is none other than Mr. Callistus Jean-Louis. He has been a guest of mine before. He's no stranger to our studio. And I've invited him back because, let me tell you, the videos circulating yesterday were not pleasant. They were among the most heinous that I have ever seen. And it gives us a snapshot of what we can expect in the future, not just from the players in the video, but from the neighborhood, the neighbors and the bystanders. Welcome, Callistus.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the invitation, so at least we could discuss this issue. And I personally will call it a crisis, because hundreds upon hundreds of our children are experiencing similar fates, and it seems there's a cultural acceptance of that type of behavior that have been perpetrated against children, and the thought of saying, when will this thing end? I do not know, because we're in 2019, the 21st century, and we still see this sort of behaviors meted out against helpless children.
Before we continue, we'll have a look at the videos in question. For those of you who are not familiar, and just to refresh, and I'm saying refresh our memories, because I want it to play in your mind like a broken record. I want it to play in your minds like a broken record, so that when you see that kind of behavior taking place in your neighborhood, your first instinct will not be to whip out your cell phone and to record it and then circulate it, and that's another issue, and to circulate it for whatever perverse pleasure you may be getting out of it, but to stand up for the weaker, more vulnerable, and marginalized among us. Let's take a look.
You have my shoe in your feet. You know I have to go to class in your. You going in my shoe? Huh? You go to show. Our what? Our what? Our what? Our what? Our what? And try to fix your face in front of me before I box you today. Ask somebody if you're in your. What the feel? Huh? That's not choke. I come and choke you by the road. Choke. Just choke you in your. Move my shoe in your feet. Move it in your and go and clean it and put it back when you get it. Hurry up. Clean your front and go and put it back where you What the is wrong with your child?
Now, you would have noticed that you probably couldn't tell all of what she was saying, because there was that much bleeping out. And the reason for the bleeping is because the type of language. Now, I contemplated just playing it raw, because we are so desensitized sometimes to that kind of language. It's commonplace. But I decided to blip it out to underscore the kind of language that is used towards a juvenile. Callistus.
As I said earlier on, Laura, this type of behavior is so rampant. I do not know what next should be done in terms of sending information out there. I think more needs to be done, in terms of the media, in doing parenting and interpersonal skills, to develop that. Because number one, if you realize, if you watched that video, you will see that this is somebody, the aunt. I thought it was a mother, but I got to understand it was an aunt. She's very angry. Okay. She seems to have a very low tolerance. She seemed to be unempathetic, because if you can deduce all of those things, the lack of communication skills, you could see it is clear there. And what it is saying to me is that you can only give out, okay, what was in there. So we are looking at the concept of social learning. Children learn what they see, what they hear, what they experience, and they make it be part of the characteristics. And that's why it is important to get it right before you're going to have children. Because this aunt, if I have to do a psychosocial assessment, I could guarantee you she is one who goes through, is highly stressed out. And when people are highly stressed out, they become very hypersensitive to any little thing. They'll get angry fast. So there's an anger problem there. And as a result of that, we will not expect anything different from her. But I'm hoping that the police get involved in that case.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping that human services also get involved in that case, because in my mind, that abuse may just be the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is happening to that child, in terms of proper parental care, proper parental supervision, in terms of poverty. Just watching the video, you can make an assessment and say, okay, let's do a risk assessment, and let the police follow up, and let human services follow up.
Now, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I happen to know that these organizations that you're talking about are involved, and they are looking into. They are looking into, because when I reached out to social services, I was informed that they are aware of the situation, and we, along with the police, are looking into the matter.
Very good.
So I was very happy for that, because oftentimes we complain, and I do it all the time, and I complain all the time, why are you whipping out your phone and videotaping this and then circulating it? For me, I think that there are some people who get a perverse pleasure of putting this thing out. Oh, look what happened, ha 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 ha, whatever. But by the same token, the same instrument that is so negative is a positive thing in its own way, because without that tape, we won't have that evidence of what is happening to this child. And if we look at the posture, as you were saying, there's a lot that you could tell from this video. Yes. If you look at the posture of the child, she never flinched, she never defended herself, except for that one outburst, and for that she got even more whipping. And for me, that was very instructive. What do you think?
Oh yes, the mere fact she could have just stayed there and been numb to that type of beating, it tells me that is not the first time. So she has become numb.
And she's realized that every time she defends herself, it gets worse.
That's right.
So let me just take 5 seconds of it. It will be over soon. What state of mind do you have to be in? Because the whip she was using broke. And I don't know if you
Oh,
remember
it looked
when
like a piece of branch of.
yes,
of
I was just
something.
saying, when we were kids and they would take those tamarind and skin that thing and put it to soak so that you could get a good whipping. This is what it reminded me of. And I had seen enough of my friends get whipped with that thing. And it actually broke. And I remember even some teachers used to use it in school, in class. And that thing broke and it was in tatters. What mindset, what frame of mind must that young lady be in to receive that and to not flinch? And what implications would that have for her future?
Just let me look. When you look at parenting in St. Lucia or even in the Caribbean, parenting has been very abusive to children from generations ago. What is happening there is nothing new. And this is why I started saying they appear to have this cultural acceptance of violence against children. Because as you rightly said, a lot of people believe children don't have rights. They don't have feelings. Children does not experience psychological and emotional problems. A lot of people just believe that. And what happened to them, this is what they know.
And they survived.
And they are
survived.
saying, but what they are doing, they are only propagating this type. Because I'm telling you, I was saying to you earlier on, just by Chase Gardens there, by the multipurpose court, I often pass there to go to the gym. And there is this young lady who is a parent again, and I can see the same description in terms of characteristics, the background, and she has this little girl and boy, and mostly every time I pass there, okay, she would be cursing those children, making threats. I'm standing there and I'm watching, I'm saying, but she doesn't get it, But to them, and that's where moral reasoning comes in, because when acts of violence have been perpetrated against children, they tend, as they grow up, to accept that this is the way.
Because they're not the norm.
Right, because that's what my parents did to me. And look at me, I have survived. I've not gone to jail.
It tells you that they have not understood the psychological damage that they have gone through and continue to go through because it's so normal for them.
It has been normal, because if you realize when the government, and that's one thing I applaud this government for, when they took the step and say we need to end corporal punishment in school. What else? A lot of teachers, I keep asking those teachers, how many of them who went to South Louis Community College or any teaching institution where they learn about teaching and discipline, classroom management and all of that, and corporal punishment was part of it.
It's nowhere in there.
It's zero. But because of the cultural norm that is accepted, rather than use what you have learned, they go back to the same old mess.
And one of the things that struck me when the whole furor of the abolishment of corporal punishment is that when you take away our form of punishment, what else? What other form of punishment do you give us? And I am stressing the word punishment because nowhere did they talk about discipline. They only spoke about punishment. And I wonder if, as teachers and educators, that they are equating punishment with discipline.
And that's two different concepts, Laura.
Absolutely.
Two different concepts. And because what we want to instill in children is discipline, for our children to be confident, for them to be cooperative, and for them to be well adjusted. Okay? But again, that whole traditional thing is because most of those parents, and you can see it when they move into marriage, you can see it in terms of when people become supervisors or managers. Okay? The same learning experience. What? They lack interpersonal skills. They lack communication skills. They are very rigid in their thinking. They like a lot of control. To them, if they don't have control, they cannot delegate or whatever it is. And they become very punitive. And it ends up in a marriage because you see this thing because they don't know how to communicate effectively.
And one of the things I've noticed in Caribbean people, and I'm not going to restrict it to St. Lucia because I've observed it in other Caribbean men and women as well. It's very difficult for us to show love and compassion. So when you have a person...
Say, I am sorry for what I've done to you.
Forget about that part. Forget about that part. Forget about that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what? I've heard parents say that.
Our parents have never taught us.
Even when they are caught dead wrong. Sorry for what? I've heard that. Sorry for what? One of the things, a simple thing as a hug.
Very difficult to
I have hugged people and they've stood as stiff as a board, and I'm wondering,
is it part of the schema?
You wonder, you're like, what is going on? Why? Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, until I had traveled, I did not realize that it was a part of us. And that even though you're in a household where you hear the L word very often, that it's become, it sips into your psyche from outside because your inner circle is small and the outside circle is much larger. It sips into your psyche that it is acceptable not to hear the L word or to get those hugs and kisses. And then when you do get into an environment where it's commonplace,
it looks foreign.
Yes, it takes you back. It takes you back.
And that's the same thing because I remembered. And again, we bring in the St. Lucian psyche in the whole traditional type of way we have been brought up, very punitive to discipline. I remember when I was in the police force, where I was transferred to community relation branch, and some police officer, friend of mine, he was a sergeant, asked me, "Jolie, koto ye se jusa?" So I tell him, "I'm community relation branch." "Ah, community relation branch? Sapa policing.
Yes.
Because they cannot understand the effectiveness of the softer skills. Because you win hearts and minds. But again, the whole thing about being punitive, showing you in control.
Almighty and powerful.
That is it.
Yet we have this old adage, again, that says you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. And I wonder if we understand what that is actually saying to us.
Yes. So again, we need to have more programs in terms of teaching people parenting skills. Because let me give an experience. I was invited to a wedding, and they had the reception somewhere by Massey. Not Rodney Bay, the other one, Rodney Heights. In the Valmore building.
Right.
And we had to go for food. And the food was line up on some, yes. And there was this lady, and that lady must have been close to 70. And she had a grandson with her, and the boy was about 4 years old, little boy. So she warned him, and I hope that she is listening. And she warned him not to touch anything there. But children are always curious. That is their nature. And one of the things...
And that's how they learn.
You see, one thing about children, they explore because they're trying to learn the environment. And that is natural. If you look at any little cat, any little dog, or if you look at Discovery Channel with lions, they always move away. That is the nature. So she gave him the warning to not touch anything there. So he saw the piece of chicken there. So he stretched his hand and tried to pull off a little thing. So I touched her and I told her, look, he's touching the thing. So I thought she would just speak with him. I told you not. She literally took his hand and slammed his hand on the table. And the little boy screamed.
And now, you're not supposed to scream, huh? You're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to just take that pain that they themselves cannot withstand, they cannot tolerate, and just suck it in.
Yeah, but imagine a grandmother is doing that to us and taking his little hand, okay, to correct him, and slam his little hand on that big wooden table there. And that little boy is in pain. So I'm telling about, why should you have done that to him? There was a man next to her, he seems to be her friend, of the same age. And he was justifying what the lady just did, saying, c'est qu'on yoka aller voler. So rather than seeing how immoral that response was to the child, so you have to break his little hand to tell him he ought not to have done that. And I'm just showing you the whole cultural acceptance, because people believe that the more violent, and government held a couple of weeks ago this workshop somewhere by Government Building on bullying. Parents and people in authority bully their children on a daily basis. I worked at Boys Training Center for 13 years. And mostly every boy, during the time I worked there, came with serious marks, bruises on their head, bruises on their back, cuts. Now, if corporal punishment was working, it would have worked for them. But it never worked. The more they meted out corporal punishment against those boys, the worse they became.
And you know, these same older people are the same ones who always tell you, they believe in the corporal punishment, but they tell you on the flip side, there's a saying, how it goes, just slipped me, coup paka corrigé. But you do it over and over and over, and that's the definition of insanity,
Yes.
isn't it?
But watch it. There's another thing there. It is being said, especially by the grandmothers. When you do this, when they can bat you, you want to doctor, you want to teacher, you want to. But c'est things là, moi pas ça pour what you believe worked during your time. It's no longer working today, but they refuse to learn
Now,
parenting skills.
There's something that, and the term just slipped me, that I was listening to Dr. King one time, and he was talking about that kind of behavior, how it's sipped in our DNA. I will try to recall throughout the program the term, but he was talking about how it's in your DNA. It's kind of like in your DNA, that kind of behavior. So while it might not have manifested, in one generation, but it comes up. It keeps coming up. I can't remember. The term just slipped me right now. And I always I thought that was very interesting, and I did some research on it, and it was amazing the amount of research that had gone into that. But it just speaks to the things that they say work, and then they themselves tell you it doesn't work, or it manifests not to be working, and they think it's worked. We're due for a break, but before we go on break, I just want us to remember that children do have rights.
Oh yes.
Children do have rights.
But a lot of people don't believe
They
that
don't
children
believe
have
in the rights, but the children do have rights. And I there was at one point, I was one of those who's like, children's rights? What children's rights? And then, almost like a switch, something happened, and then I went, but what about the child's right to a safe home? What about the child's right to protection? And I'm like, you just said what children's rights. And then, so children do have rights. I think there are about 54 articles, and they can be summed up in about 4 main ones. And we'll just go over that quickly. I'll just set the pace for the next segment. Survival rights, developmental rights, protection rights, and participation rights. We'll deal with those when we come back. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to what's happening now with Laura. Before the break, we spoke about children's rights, and we mentioned that there are about 54 articles with the Children's Rights Convention, and we spoke about the fact that they can all be summed up in about 4 broad headings: survival rights, and those cover a child's right to life and the needs that are most basic to existence. These include an adequate living standard, shelter, nutrition, and access to medical services. What do you?
This is a right you ought not to be denied. Children ought not to be denied. However, I must clearly state that they have a number of children who are being born, and they do not have access to any of those things. Working in the police force opened my eyes to a lot of things, because I did not know so much poverty existed in St. Lucia. I was transferred to the Mabia Valley down in La Calle, and I think I said it on the show already, and I was exposed to the shock of my life to find how children live. The edifice or the structures that they call home without proper flooring, and children don't even have proper meals, proper supervision and love, because all this is a right. When you bring children into this world, this is a right, it's not a privilege. And hence it is important that if people are not prepared for parenting, they should not go into it and use the contraceptive.
Which is why I found it very strange that some people in certain quarters, I think maybe the Prime Minister uses, he's very blunt sometimes, and he says things that are, and I don't always agree with everything he says, but in this case, I totally agreed, where he says where a mother already has a child and is able to care for that child, and then she has another one that the state needs to step in to, not for the mother, but for the well-being of the child. That is the essence of what I got from what he was saying. And he was excoriated for it, saying that the Prime Minister wants to punish poor people for being poor. And it's not about poor people being poor, because there are people who do not have material things. They don't have material things, but they care for the children in a superlative manner. But those people who already, they cannot afford, like we said, those survival rights, and they're bearing more children, it is a bigger...
they increase the vulnerability of both themselves and the child, and place them at risk, health risk, all sorts of abusive risk. And hence, it is important that when a woman is pregnant and they go to clinic, because they're supposed to go to clinic in whatever community, that an assessment is done.
Absolutely.
And that's where the intervention's supposed to start. You need to educate them, because you realize that she's unable to take care of herself, much less a baby.
Right.
So intervention with human services or whatever support group needs to begin at that time. Educate her about Planned Parenthood. Educate her about using contraceptive, including condoms or even abstinence. You know, because I have had a few of these. Actually, when Boys Training Center used to have their parenting workshops, first thing we used to teach them is about self-care. How to take care of yourself, how to love yourself, love your body. Okay? Yes, nobody's saying to you not to go and have sex, but there are certain things that you can do
to protect
yourself. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, nobody can do it for you, and you will not be in the position to adequately take care of a child, and you have just increased the risk of vulnerability to that child. So I believe government role is to educate and to create the supportive mechanism so that the person will learn how to behave differently. Right. You already have your 5. Now we are working with you. We'll send you to places like NSD, because I've done that at a lot of parents at Boys Training Center when I used to work there, or in my private capacity, many times because they do not feel empowered because they don't have jobs. And when you don't have a job and you're relying on a man, that's what men like to abuse you. So the first thing that I would do to help the child is to begin to empower them and say, okay, you need to start taking care of yourself.
Right.
And I used to make a referral to NSDCC, and NSDC used to help them. They give you the stipends and all of those things. And a number of those women now are working at hotels, restaurants, and they would come back and say, Mr. Jean-Louis, and they always come back, thank you very much. And they now have better control of their life. Their parenting now has improved because they're no longer on that high level of stress or depression. Okay? And this is the way we need to go. Have more NSDCs. So you give them what you call the second chance, okay, to empower. Because when a person is self-empowered, they are able to move the world. They can be very better parents, and they can contribute to the stability and economy of the country.
Right. So that segues right into the next grouping of rights, which is the developmental rights, and that includes those things that children require in order to reach their fullest potential. And examples are the right to education, play, and leisure, because we don't believe in a child has a right to play and have leisure time. Cultural activities, access to information. We think a child that knows a little bit too much is too precocious, it will form, it will numb. And freedom of thought. So you cannot have any of your own thoughts. The only thoughts you must have must replicate mine. Conscience and religion. So let's talk about that.
That is powerful. When I did child psychotherapy in my master's program, the professor, it was a female, she was one of the most highly acclaimed child psychologists in Trinidad and Tobago. Very expensive, because that was her specialty. And what she said, I took note of it because I was able to observe that. The biggest problem to hamper the psychological, emotional, and intellectual development of a child is schoolwork. The schoolwork now for children is so saturated that children do not have time to play. They don't have time to experience the world. From school to school at home, and his work, and many times you're the parent, you're tired, and you're the one who have to do the work with the child till, and right now I'm hearing little ones have to do SBAs and more and more. And what parents do, because the little minds, okay, is still developing, and the minds develop at various rates. Some children are fast learners because then the minds are developing. But the norm is much of those children are left behind because of the amount, the quantum of schoolwork. And parents now are making it even more unpleasant for them because they shout at the children when they make mistakes. They beat them. They humiliate them.
The concept was not difficult enough. When my mind is relaxed for me to accept it, you're going to have to put me under more stress for me to get it.
So a lot of children now, that's why I say a lot of parents, they bully. Parenting is a lot of bullying. The misuse of power, parental power over the child. So the child will stay by the table just crying. The parent have a strap because I don't understand the concept, and beating me will make me understand
it will clear my mind, it will relax my mind enough that the concept now. I always wonder, even as a child, I always wondered about that. I don't understand it in my most relaxed state. you're going to add stress on
Stress.
it. I am now afraid. I couldn't do it before, and now you've introduced fear.
Fear.
And so that means when what happens when you're afraid? You get tense.
Yes.
Let me tell you.
And the brain begins to shut
Everything
down.
starts to hurt, and you haven't even started getting the licks yet. Everything on your body hurts. The brain shuts down because it's like you have nowhere to flee. You cannot.
Nowhere.
You can't run.
And
so
the parents
you're stuck.
want you to get that.
You're stuck,
And you're being beaten
and it gets worse.
almost every single day. Children, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, as early as even at the preschool, they wanted to put endless work, and the ministry had to step in and said no.
But that's why the children have to learn their cognitive skills, their social
cognitive
skills. You know how to
their
play with
motor
one.
skills.
Yes, play with one another, socialize. That is the
that's
stage for that.
But we saw academics, and that is why in 2006, there was the poverty assessment report. I can clear it because I had access to it. I read it, and it said the education system in St. Lucia is outdated.
Oh, yes.
And it does not meet the needs, and it does not prepare the children for the world of work. But we still push a lot of academics, and we add more to it every day. And those little minds, a lot of those children become suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
They develop learning disabilities because they get to hate school.
I once saw a child, a friend of mine, her daughter, afraid to go to bed. And her mom's like, but why? Go to bed. You'll wake up in the morning and you... She's like, no, because what if I oversleep and I'm not able to finish? She said, so you're not able to finish the assignment? You're not able to finish the assignment. If you're worried about that, I'll give you a note. She says, no, the teacher will be very disappointed. And I'm like, you're not afraid that your parent is going to be disappointed. You are afraid that the teacher will be disappointed. And that is the kind of pressure they hit, especially when children show that they have a propensity to grasp things. There is this pressure, this added pressure. The pressure is not only on those who are finding difficulty grasping. The pressure is also on those who have a propensity to grasp fast, to grasp even faster. And to... It's like, what are you doing? So it's a
competition now.
Yes.
Learning is no longer friendly. It becomes a competition. And the children are placed under lots of pressure. The children loses because their childhood, because when they're supposed to be on vacation, you work. And when you go on vacation, tell me, Laura, you expect to go and do more work for you? It's a time out.
It's a time, and that's what it's for: rejuvenating. It's for recreating.
Exactly.
It's all the reason. Rebooting.
That's the whole purpose.
That's the whole point
because
of
you
it.
push the child to a certain point, and then they get their break for them to rejuvenate. Let the brain relax. Because I remember when I did my master's and my bachelor's, after I finished, I didn't, every semester, I didn't want to see a book in my life again. You know? But what we do, we so want to push our children, whatever goals that we couldn't accomplish, or the competition with other people, we push our children. And when it's time for vacation, we give them, the children cannot play.
I'll tell you something. One of the things I experienced when you go to school, they tell you, now, this, when you go off vacation, especially summer vacation, they tell you, now, this is not the time, chance for you to go and forget everything you have learned. Well, let me tell you something. If I go on summer vacation for a couple of months and I come back to school not remembering anything I learned the past year, you know what that tells me? I did not learn anything in the first place.
Because you cram to...
Yes, because I have not learned anything. If I cannot remember what I am supposed to have learned in a year, I have forgotten it in 2 months. It meant that I hadn't learned anything to begin with, and the indictment is on you because you're supposed to teach me. I'm supposed to learn. But if you haven't taught me, how can I learn? If all you are doing is pressuring me to absorb or to cram or to
and most of the learning is to regurgitate.
Right.
You know, but the point is, Laura, the child has a right to develop in a normal and natural way to become their own person.
Absolutely.
But what we have done, we have taken away childhood from children. So you from a child, early o'clock, and from very early o'clock, you are ingrained in becoming an adult.
And when you act like a little adult now,
Because but that is, there's a psychological disorder where people now, they are adult, they realize they've lost the childhood. They have lost the time of the innocence because they have been involved in adult life. In other words, in the whole there's this movie Rush Hour thing and they lost the sense of self, the childhood. And when they are adult now, they're reverting back to that because they're trying to
recreate
it.
Yeah.
You know? And the people do not know how much damage. Now, I'm a person who, see, when it's holidays, you tell me the same way for me. When I went to school after the semester end, I need a break. My brain needs to rest because next semester is coming. The same thing with you. Let them relax and have fun. Okay? If you want to do something with them, let them enjoy a nice movie, because a lot of the European countries, they move away from those books, and then, but what they do, they introduce them to art and things that they love, and afterwards, you can tell them to paint something, because you're creating whatever in your mind, but they don't understand that. Or you just write a little composition or whatever on the movie that you have just watched, and you went, because that's something you like.
Now, I'll tell you something. To my mind, if during the school term I'm supposed to do schoolwork throughout the term and I get a smaller amount of time for recreation and leisure, when I'm on vacation, the converse should be should hold true. I am supposed to relax and be at leisure and have, maybe if I have to do an hour of, just to keep my mind occupied or to keep it, fresh or whatever, an hour of reading a book or doing some sort of revision, schoolwork for whatever. It should be the opposite, right? School time, I spend 8 hours doing my schoolwork. Vacation time, I should be doing 8 hours of recreation and 1 hour of schoolwork. If schoolwork has to be there at some point.
But heritage in the child growth and development, we need to understand there are different types of learners. Okay,
absolutely.
And there are children who are kinesthetic. Oh, their hands that's how they learn. They have children who are visual. Okay, they see. Now I'm very visual. I can stay there. I and auditory. I can listen to somebody say something and I remember, or I can watch a lot of documentaries and I will remember. That is me. But do not tell me to read a book. I've never read a book when I say entire book. I'll start on the first chapter and I never finish the first chapter. The only time I tried it is when I had to do my bachelor's and my master's. You have your highlighters. You just highlight the important. But I would remember.
I'm like that. I always try to go to the lectures because I remember, and especially if I make notes, I may not go back to the notes, but the fact that I wrote that down, I can recall. Right. I wrote that down. I can recall the concept. But let's slip away from this a little bit and go into, because it's sort of related, where we have to safeguard the children, and that's the protection rights.
Oh, yes.
That requires that children be safeguarded against all forms of abuse, neglect, exploitation. They cover issues such as special care for refugee children, torture, abuses in the criminal justice system, involvement in armed conflict, child labor, drug abuse, and sexual exploitation. And this particular one really brought to mind, really made me remember little Milan Ferdinand. I think 4 years ago, he was killed, and the police had found that his parents were the culprits. And when he when he died, they found that he died as a result of severe brain damage, head injury.
Where here?
Yes, in St. Lucia, due to blunt force trauma. That was a major thing. His stepmother was arrested.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay.
and they found that the stepmother had been negligent and contributory to his demise, and that was very profound for me, because the marks on his body.
But I said to you about boys training center.
Yeah,
This is a common thing.
And that child went to school. That child was at school, and that child was removed from his mom because they said the mom was not capable. Right, the family had determined that the mom was not capable. I think she had some mental stresses at the time, and so they placed him in the care of the father. The father had married this other woman, and I don't know that what her grief was with the child, but she had been abusing that child.
But where was social services? Because
that's the thing.
It was the process of the court that would remove this child from the mother to the father.
Right.
And human services was supposed to do the follow-up, because this is where the child has the right to be protected.
Exactly. And there were a number of safety nets that were not there for that child. The school system failed that child. The social protective services had failed that child. The family unit had failed that child. The neighbors had failed that child, because you can't tell me that child died of blunt force trauma, brain injury, and that child never cried out once when he was getting licked down. Nobody can convince me of that. That was a little 4-year-old child. It wasn't the 14-year-old or 13-year-old we saw in the previous video where she's toughened up, and little babies, they're going to cry, even if they don't defend themselves, but they're going to cry, because they have not necessarily made that connection. If I don't cry, then the abuse and the torture will be over faster. At 4-year-old, so all of those safety nets, all of those organizations or institutions which are supposed to be there.
The community, because somewhere that child just went through.
Just fell through the cracks. And that is the one that really... that protection rights for children.
In Trinidad, I remember in Trinidad, there was this little boy, 12 years old, and he had this behavioral problem, strong-willed child or whatever it is, and the parents beat that little boy. It was not changing the behavior, and they resorted to putting him in a cage with pit bulls, where the pit bulls were biting all on him. And there are people who will find nothing wrong with those behaviors, Until when a neighbor alerted the police, and I remember seeing that on TV6, where they removed this little boy from that cage with the dogs. You see, because people are looking at behavior. They have a lot of psychological disorders, and many times parents are not seeking help, because there's what is known as ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and this is a disorder where there's an imbalance in the neurotransmitters that the brain produces, and because of the imbalance, the child develops attention span issues, and the child becomes very hyperactive. But many parents, especially the traditional ones, all what they see, they look at behavior. And all what they learn, but the child has the right to be protected from all of those things. And any decent parent will realize, okay, I have noticed a pattern. I would need to seek help, because I cannot do it. But our tradition is spare the rod, spoil the child, play your battle pattern. So they use more barbaric means, because the whole thing is about control and disciplining, not on finding out what is happening with the child that I'm missing out on.
And especially when you have these kids that are cooped up in a house 24/7. I go to school, I'm cooped up in a classroom. I have 1 hour of recreation. I come home, 1 hour salamweni of recreation, and I'm cooped up in that house. And already I have this attention deficit, as you mentioned. To me, my child is hyperactive. I'm letting you go outside and run.
Let the child use.
Cool. Run until you cannot run anymore. You must get
A
tired.
long time we used to have spacey yards. But now we don't.
Or the savannah, even if you don't have a yard, but you have the savannah where all the children can run and play football or
But the community
whatever.
spirit again is gone because people are becoming more Americanized. They become very individualistic, and because of that, everybody is in their little space. They raise their children within their little space. The children don't go out and socialize. And if your child is ADHD and that child is in the house, your child will make you talk. And if the child makes you talk, you'll get frustrated.
You hear it all the time. You hear it all
and
the
that's
time.
where the abuse comes in. But the responsibility of the parent is to protect that child and help that child become the person that he or she is meant to be. And seek help, but they have difficulty seeking the help.
But sometimes I think it's that they don't even know they need help. Because it's like what we talked about earlier. It's the norm. That's how I was raised. I had this nervous energy, and that's what they did to me. So I'm going to pass it on to my children. And it's like we said earlier, you can only give what is within you.
Yes.
You can't give out anything else. And if your exposure to other things is very limited, you don't even have that ability to learn from outside of your own personal interaction with your family. You don't have that, so your scope of learning other things is very limited.
Yeah, and this is where this program comes in now, to start the conversation, to help people think, to help them understand children's behavior is as a result of a number of things. Sometimes all what the child is looking for is attention. And you give them the attention.
However they get it, they're going to take it.
Safe. It's just like you're in a relationship with your spouse. And your spouse is not taking you on. You're giving everybody, you will feel an emptiness and you'll begin to do things. So the spouse will be able to notice you and give you the attention.
And you're an adult, eh?
And you're an adult. Much less a child, because children do not have the ability to communicate as adults. So they communicate through their behavior. So all what they need is the little attention.
I have heard children say, my favorite teacher was XYZ. And I say, and I know the kind of legs they get in that class. And that teacher was your favorite teacher. You know why that person is there? That teacher gave them the most attention.
When with the legs. And you're so correct, because there was a boy at the center. That boy was a unique boy because his circumstances were so severe. He was born a cocaine syndrome baby, where they had to drain the blood out of his mother and out of him and give him new blood. And from small, he was being abused by the grandmother. They don't understand what is happening to a boy, or being abandoned, neglected, or whatever. So he was sent to Boys Training Center. And finally, from very young, and we decided, okay, let's send him to school. And I was his counselor. And every afternoon, he would come from school. He's coming out, oh, Mr. Jolly, my teacher beat me again. Oh, he loved it.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
He would do things to get attention. And when the teacher beats him in front of the he loved it because it was all what he was asking for attention. So I now had to go to the school to sit with the teacher to help her understand what is happening there, and she need to use some other way of working with him.
Now, our lines were not quite open yet, but we have an impatient viewer, so we have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. Hello? Okay, so we lost the call. So since it's, wow, the time is creeping up on us, let's go through the final class of rights: participation rights, rights to allow children to take an active role in their communities and the nation. These encompass the freedom to express opinions, to have a say in matters affecting their own lives, to join associations and to assemble peacefully. As their abilities develop, children are to have increasing opportunities to participate in the activities of their society in preparation for responsible adulthood. And that is another one that's close and dear to me. I think every child from age 5, if not younger, should belong to some sort of club that will help them not only socialize with each other but accept responsibility, so that they can form opinions, that they can interact with others with differing opinions, so that they can have responsibility for what goes on within their little clubs. So whilst you have adult supervision, allow the children to decide the fate of the club, the association, and what goes on within the association.
Well, I agree with that. And one thing I love about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, raised in the church from time I was 10 years old. And in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, there's this club, you know about, the Pathfinders Club. And
that's similar to like the Girl Guides.
Right.
And, yeah.
And it is encouraged that every child, okay, from childhood, there's the one before Pathfinders, the little kindergarten one, and they teach them so many things there. They teach them to participate and to speak, to interact, and by the time they reach Pathfinders, they go out and they do all sorts of wilderness trips. They go to various islands. Then the adolescents, there's the Master Guide Club, and this is it gives them a sense of belonging and to participate in their communities and to give back to the community, because all of these things you have to give back and also to develop the necessary interpersonal skills that help you to develop. And as Christ said, as you rightly said, that is important. Another thing you said, which is key, we need to give children to be participants in decision making. You know, and because our culture again is we filter everything down to the child, but we are not listening. Okay, and so then the child feels left out, because the child will have likes too, and the child would want to contribute.
Yes. And it's important you said, because I'm director for a junior choir in church.
What church you?
I'm a Catholic. Okay. I'm Roman Catholic, and just like your faith, we encourage. At every step of a child's life, there are different groups. We have choir, we have so many different groups. We have Girl Guides, we have so many different groups. We have the youth club. We have so many different groups that we encourage the children at various stages in their lives as they get older to join one of those, because it's so inclusive. But the main thing is the parents have to encourage the children, because if you don't even take the children to church, you give them the opportunity to just do whatever they want, you have to guide them. We have a call. Thank you for calling. You're on the line.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, good night.
Good night. Can you turn down the volume of the television, because it's creating a feedback?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. You talk about bully, but I watching at you, the way you talk, you open your eyes and you do things like that. You look like you are bully too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that made no sense. We have a technical difficulty downstairs. Our guest isn't hearing, so let us try to fix that. But then this caller was just saying that we're talking about bullying, but because I'm a very expressive person, I have big eyes, and I'm going to show the caller exactly why my eyes open wide. I have big eyes. I'm very expressive. I use my hands. I'm very expressive with my face, and so that means I'm a bully as well. So, but yeah, there are some of us that are in our own zone, somewhere out there in NASA. But I was saying that, so I'm a director for the junior choir. And sometimes I give them they have a whole structure. There's a junior director, there's a president, And I am always tempted when they're not doing it. To come in and say, okay, we're going to do it this way, because you guys need the guidance. And there's nothing wrong with guidance. There's nothing wrong with us guiding our kids, but we have to learn to step back and let them, even when they have a failure in our minds, what we consider a failure, it may not necessarily be a failure for them, but it's a teachable moment for them.
Moment.
Exactly.
So you need to sit with your child and tell, okay, what did
you learn from? And we don't do that often
don't
enough.
Do those things.
Yes, we have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
I was astonished.
Can you hear? Hold on, a caller.
Yeah, I said I was very astonished when I saw something on the news clip about an aunt was beating a young girl.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
And she beat that girl so bad, and I'm just saying, what, even the aunt reports that person needed help. You cannot beat a child like that. And the child tried to block the licks, right? Mm-hmm. And her whole hand must have been, sword and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What do you do to people like that? Because that's a child. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying a lot of people condone that. And, if that would happen in America, you take jail.
Absolutely.
Because that's abusing a child,
Absolutely.
a minor.
Absolutely.
And that was my 2 cents. I need to hear what you have to say on that.
Okay. Thank you so much for calling. Right. So did you hear? So we had discussed that, and we talked about the anger issues that the caregiver and the stress that she must be under, and we talked about the psychological impact that the child needs to go through some sort of counseling.
Oh yes, certainly, and you see, all is not lost, because when we see these things, that tells me they need to have intervention. This individual also needs help, because it is a cycle of violence, and this is where the police and human services need to come in for this person to go to anger management classes and various people skills training. So because the idea is not to be punitive, because I can guarantee she do not know better. But the idea is to help these people, and they need to have more parenting and more life skills programs.
But it begs the question to Callistus, where are the parents of that child? How come it is that is her caregiver? What made the aunt think that she has the right to abuse that child that way? Maybe because she looked pretty young herself. Maybe there are what we call barrel babies, kids whose parents are not physically there to care for them, so they leave them in the care of an adult, and then they send these barrels down. They're unable to come to visit because maybe they're illegal wherever they are, or they can't really afford the airfare, or whatever the case may be. So it would be very instructive to find out what the home situation, the background story is. Is the aunt the main caregiver for that child?
It appears so to me.
Yes, and does she have the emotional levels, the maturity level to parent? Because she looked pretty young. Right, because she said, I have to go to class, and you took my shoes. So,
because you see, the emotional bond, you don't see that, and in psychology there's attachment theory, where people are sensitive to the needs of others. You don't see that there. And this is why this is the reason I'm saying human services need to come in to do the background checks, to understand the unique situation the child and that family is in, and for them to get help. The idea is to help the families.
We have a call.
Hello.
Hi, good evening. You're on the air.
Yes. What you said, that's true.
Can you turn down the volume of your television set, please?
There are a lot of parents that we can touch you. I was in town, I see a mother beating a child in town. I said, why are you doing the child that? Don't tell me nothing. That's my child. Because from ever. I said, thank you. If you beat the child again, I call the police for you. Yeah. The wicked. Good night.
Okay, thank you so much.
You see, a lot of these people don't, they have not sufficiently developed to understand
good night.
the moral and the spiritual reasoning in terms of the right or wrong in that. Because many times this same thing is what happened to them.
Exactly. And it's a normal, as we said.
It's a
I
norm.
remember being in my parents' store, and then there was this child who bought something, and she obviously bought the wrong thing. So she came back with her grandma, and her grandma told her, go and ask to get it changed. And she said, okay. And she was explaining to my mom, who was at the cash at the time, what she wanted, and she bought the wrong thing. Can she get it changed? And my mom was telling her yes. Now, so my mom had sent her back to the shelves to get the correct thing, and she was supposed to come back with the original item she purchased and the new item that she wanted, and to get it, the refund going and the change. And the grandma was outside bullying her and telling her, oh, I tell you, make sure you buy the right thing. And I tell you, da-da-da-da-da. And and she's obviously, she's hearing that. It's traumatizing for her because apparently they're already, according to the old people, Yoteja Veti. And she still came back and did the wrong message. So she was taking the thing off the shelf and she can't find the right thing because there's this noise outside, harassing her.
Fear, so child cannot
so she can't function.
Yeah.
She can't focus. Eventually, she got the item and she brought it on the shelf, but she forgot to bring the original item back. And so my mom is telling her, and I had enough. And I said, just allow her. You're harassing her. Just allow her to get the thing, because you could see she's a bright child. She knows she made a mistake and she's already explained and the change is being effected. But if you keep harassing her like that and haranguing her, it will be slower. Oh, but I had to tell her already. And went on and on. And I said, but you doing that is not going to help. Oh my God. That was it. Because now the switch flipped from the child to me. And now I'm not a good person. And I think I'm a good person. And I'm not a good person. And it's her child. And she will do what she wants with her child. And I was like,
And because that is the problem. People believe that because it is their child, they can treat. They don't believe that children have rights. And this is the message we want to send across there. Every child, the child have a right to life. From the time the child comes out.
Exactly. And that's what we spoke about. We spoke about the rights, survival rights, protection rights. Participation rights, developmental rights. These are the four broad categories of the rights of the child. And and when you think about it, you're not saying that the child has any extravagant right. It's just normal basic human rights. Rights that, if inculcated while you are an adult, as a child, will help you to become a better rounded individual adult, so that you can pass on love and compassion as you go along.
Because, you see, the reason why the UN had to go that way, prior to that, the tradition was children did not have rights. Children were prevented from going to school. They going to work. Children were placed in prison together with adults. And they were being abused sexually, and because the world saw children different from how we view children. So in order to protect children, because even in the ancient times, even you go to India and the Muslim countries, even in the Bible, you will see there's what's known as the honor killing, that if your child is a glutton and is not listening, you take the child to the priest. The priest will take him outside of the camp and he'll stone the child to death. Because that was honor killing. But when we looked at those things, we said, no, that cannot be right. Let us standardize rights that will protect children from abuse, that will put them in a position for them to develop and grow in a normal way, and to have the right to be part of a citizenry. But people still have problems with those things. People tell the children whatever they want, and that's one of the biggest things, because they say sticks and stones may break my bones,
but your words can hurt.
It's the word that do the damage.
And the damage that it does is not physical. You can't
psychological
see it,
and emotional.
But it's the worst damage, because you always second guessing yourself. You're always doubting yourself.
Always.
Am I good enough? Did I do that right? I remember don't know. I must have been a troublesome child. I don't know. I don't think I was. But there was this little thing that I see all the time. When my dad came home on an afternoon or whatever, and I heard all of us knew, okay, somebody's getting it. Somebody did something, because he is so disappointed and so mad at us that he cannot even get the words, the name. He cannot get the name right. There are four of us. He cannot get the name right. And the comes first, and in our heads we start to think, okay, what did we do? It's not me. I didn't do anything. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. So we go through that, and today I can laugh about it, because when I think about it, I got over it. I mean, I understood. I began to understand that just as I have rights, I also have the right to listen and obey.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
So if I don't do something, they've asked me 10 times to do it, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. Eventually, it will happen to me if I don't get it done. But that's not to say that's encouraging to say, okay, that's okay. I told you 10 times and you didn't do it, so I'm now going to bless you with licks because I told you to do 10 times and you didn't do it. Children they're supposed to get that protection. They're not supposed to be afraid of you. They're supposed to, they love you, they know you love them, and they know they're going to get disciplined, right? If they don't meet up to their end of the bargain. But they should
discipline
never
does
fear.
not necessarily mean hitting a child. We need to make that
and I was explaining to you off air, where my little almost 3-year-old niece, we put her in timeout. And that just being by herself in that little corner by the door where nobody's talking to her, and by the time you come back after 3 minutes and say, okay, do you understand? Yes. And do you do? Yes. If she doesn't want to do, because one thing her mom likes to do is to cuddle her and say, okay, I'm Lizzie, but so, and if you do this, then auntie will love you, or and whatever. And then she's finished, okay, now go do what auntie said. And she goes. Nobody has beat her. Nobody has harangued her. Nobody has harassed her. Nobody has shouted after her.
Because consistency is the key. You need to teach our children what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. By how you interact. The child does something, you let her know this is inappropriate.
And children will not know better. The first time a child does something, you think they're born with a chip in the brain. We see they're like little computers, they're born with chips in their brain. But they're not born with a chip in the brain to know right from wrong. You as an adult continue to learn appropriate behavior vis-a-vis inappropriate behavior.
Because that's something we learn over time.
Over time. A little 3-year-old baby, a 4-year-old child, in the case of Milan Ferdinand, what could that child have possibly done that you had not to repeat? But it's by repeating yourself. That's how children learn to talk.
Reinforcement.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how we learn to. That's very well said.
Talk. If we
sound
don't
like a St. Lucian.
Exactly. If we don't speak to them, we don't continuously say ball. But they will never know. And that is why sometimes some children take a long time to speak, because adults don't speak to children. And when they speak to children, they speak gibberish. So I'm never going to learn words if you're not teaching me words. When you speak to me, what you're doing, you're teaching me. And if you're not speaking to me, you're shouting at me or you're abusing me, you're not teaching me. So or what are you teaching me?
All the
wrong things. So when I start, and one of the things, sometimes we get excited and we talk loud, and my little niece and all of the little babies, all the little children that raise us, we notice the same thing. They do the same thing as they grow older. So everybody's excited and talking loud, and the child just goes, and they don't know what they're saying, but they're saying it because to them that's what they're hearing. When all the adults are speaking over each other and they're talking loud and excited and passionately, they're learning how to speak and to interact just like us. So they want to be a part of it. And so they're doing it. So constantly we have to check ourselves. I'm like, maybe not appropriate for children, that kind of behavior. So we constantly have to check ourselves.
Yeah, because every experience is a learning moment for a child. That's why parents need to be careful. Especially with the nonverbal cues. Because the simple little thing that at 1 year old, 2 year old will do. We believe that they know what they're doing.
We have a caller. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi,
Yes, please turn down the
hello.
volume of the television. Terrible feedback. We lost the call.
Where were we?
The simple thing, 1-year-old.
Yes, we believe if they know or they knew what they were doing, why would a 4-year-old entangle his or herself in some plastic bag and choke?
Exactly. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yes, give thanks. Give thanks that you all have recognized, the right of the child, because as a voluntary teacher, sometimes I even hear teachers and people in certain children do not have rights, or because of all of these rights that people have. Because people seem to be confusing people's rights with giving people what you would say the incentive to do wrong, which that's not what it is. You understand? Because it don't matter if you say someone is a criminal, the person has their rights. And it seems that everyone, when their rights are infringed on, like you may have people in authority infringing on people's rights, but if it's their rights that's infringed on, you hear them going to the length and breadth, to the courts and everything to get, if they were fired and they shouldn't have been fired and they moved from a position. So I'm happy that you all spoke of the children's right, because one of the children's main rights, even as a family, not only as children, but in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says that the mother and the child needs special assistance and care. It didn't say the father and the child, It says that the mother and the child has special protection, should be given special protection. And why I called, it's very interesting, because I was very much against what you said. Kind of, was it maybe a year or so ago, when you were taking the stance with the Prime Minister concerning people who are deprived financially and stuff, and the children should be taken away. And I don't think that is a good thing to do. I mean, if children are in abusive situation, all of these things, but I think because of financial being deprived financially does not entitle the state to take a child from you. The state's supposed to be assisting you with that child. You understand? So if it's an abusive situation where the parents are not doing what they are supposed to do and going out of that, and as we're saying, but as I'm saying, lack of finance and poverty should not be a reason why children should be taken away from their parents. And
But caller, if you listened, you would have heard me. I brought that same topic back up, and I mentioned being poor is not the prerequisite for having your child removed, because there are some, or not rather being poor, but lacking material things. So you can't have 3 pairs of shoes to go to school. So what? But the one pair that you have is clean, and your clothes, and you may not have 62 dresses to one for every occasion for 3 years. But what the 3 dresses that you have, it's clean and it's decent. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those children who are impoverished and their rights are stripped from them, the rights of survival, the rights of to protection, their rights for developmental, the developmental rights, their participation right. That's a context rather in which I was looking at and continue to look at, where a child gets to be removed from a home, not just because the mom is only making $6 an hour. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Because sometimes these homes, these produce children that are more well-adjusted than the home where the parents bring in $10,000 a month, if you understand what I'm saying. Because they're left to their own devices, they don't have human interaction, they let the television raise them, they get into more trouble than the ones who don't have. And the ones who don't have are the ones that are always left holding the bag, because Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so's son or daughter could never possibly be the ringleader, if you understand what I'm saying. So that is the context in which I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, I didn't get the beginning of this program. I got you in the midway, and as I'm saying, it sounds a little different maybe from the stance you were taking a while back. Because
That's the exact stance I was taking, and maybe this time around I got to go into it more detailed. But that's the exact stance from which I was taking it. I never advocate for a child to be removed from the home just because the parent is poor. Never.
Okay. I had a heated argument with a sibling of yours.
Oh, really? We're very opinionated on our things, on the things that we believe in.
Yeah, if they're tuned in now, they might most likely recognize who's.
I'm certain I'll hear about it when I come home. Okay.
Because I was certainly disagree with your stance that you took back then. So
yeah.
But give kind of clarity, because even when it comes to the schools, what I see going on in schools, where to the point that you find a lot of blame on like parents, or the parents are not doing that. But what people need to understand, because a lot of, the system on a whole and how they are educating the children, even the teachers seem to have a problem with it. But the teachers don't seem to have a say when it comes to the administrative part of things. So you would hear a lot of teachers are disgruntled with the way that they are asking them to teach the children. Because, you see grade 1 and grade 2 and the type of sophisticated stuff they are teaching the children on the academic level. I'm saying, but that's what they're teaching. And they don't give the children that happy time and that play time and learning in a fun way. So as you have been saying, they are just taking this type of robust approach to have the children in a certain way. And
very regimented, almost like in a military setting.
Yes, kind of thing. And also, from the time I've been young to up to a day, well, I think I'm still young, but from the time I was at school till now, they had that segregation of the bright and the lazy children and all of these things. And amazingly, it always seemed to be that the more affluent children were in the brighter classes.
I wonder why.
And the more impoverished children were in the lazier classes.
I wonder why.
Maybe they don't do it in that direct approach now, because I think they have changed that system at school. But you will still find it in a very subtle way, that they are still rejecting now certain children because of the parents' background. They may learn of the children's background.
We're losing the caller. We're not hearing the caller. I guess we lost the caller. But one of the things that he said that really struck me was the fact that he said with the more affluent children being in the brighter classes, and he used the word lazy, because and that's very instructive, and that the more impoverished ones would end up being
the slower
but they're the lazy, and that's the terminology that was used. And
the labeling.
Yeah.
The labeling.
And it begs the question again, if the more affluent one gets more leisure time and gets more, and they're in an environment that's less stressed, of course it would seem that they're the brighter ones or the quicker learners, and the other children who are more stressed at home because the parent is stressed and you're stressing me out and always haranguing the children. Of course, you're not having a good night's sleep, you don't have a full tummy, you're going to school more stressed from at home. So when you get to school, you cannot focus. So it's not that the child is lazy. The child is a product of the environment.
Yes.
You know?
And it is so true. And but I myself, the way that children are placed in schools, I'm not a supporter of it. I've said it on a number of programs. We need to revisit that, because there's no top school, but what we do, we take children. What sense does it make? Take a child from Swozell and bring the child all up to St. Mary's College or Convent or any one of those schools. Pay a bus, and that's wasted. To me, that is wastage. Every school or every community should be zoned, and the community is supposed to raise the child. After school, you have programs in place. Let
I agree with you because my niece is one of those. I have a niece who lives in Labrie and goes to convent. And so I say my child because they're all my children. My child is actually falls in that bracket. But when you take a school
and you send
all the children that fall below, they're in grade 4 or they're in grade 6 and they have not attained grade 3. The level that should be at grade 3, and you take that child and you place that child in all these children in one school. Yeah. I don't want my child going to that school because most of the teaching time is going to be focused on getting those children to that standard, and my child who's already at that standard or beyond gets left behind. So that is why there is that. I'm not making an excuse for it. I think it has to come.
Tradition thing that has prestige and whatever it is, and we're afraid is the same reason you still have A-level at South or Louis. I don't.
There's
know.
an A-level down south.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, why would A-level be at South? That is advanced secondary school level. It's not tertiary level.
Right. Should be at just like at Vifford Compre. The A-level is at the secondary school.
That's how it's supposed to be. A-level is not tertiary. I'm just showing you.
Right, understand.
The tradition we holding on to it. We every school. I believe community is supposed to raise their children.
But I'll tell you, we're running out of time and we're supposed to wrap up. But I'll tell you what I think, and one of the things I always said when universal secondary school education came about, it's universal secondary education, I thought it was useless. Because we had all the schools emulating the same thing. And we didn't have a school that was a sports academy. We didn't have a school that was focusing on technical. We didn't have... All the schools were academic based. They were all following the same model, but we were sending children who obviously.
But the report said it is outdated. This type of education is outdated.
So we had all these children who didn't fall within that bracket, and the statistics. We have the statistics to prove, because every year I peruse the results. So you had schools like PI Secondary, you had schools like Angers Secondary, you had certain schools that consistently fell below par, and you wonder why. But if these schools consistently receive a large number of students who had not been at a grade 6 level, you think they're going to be at the right level by the time they get to Form 5? It's not going to happen.
In my experience with Boys Training Center, where boys were sent to secondary school, but they cannot even read and write. The background is there's a lot of the basic rights that they're supposed to have or experience.
They didn't have it. And that's what we're talking about a little bit earlier.
Poverty, because of abuse, because of a lot of things prevent children from learning. And this is the reason. Again, we need to overhaul the education system.
Which is why I applaud the government of the day for the new sports academy that's going on in Babonneau, I think, or Grosile.
Up Grosile. But the thing about the sports academy thing, I've not understood it.
Maybe we need to revisit that.
But because the whole concept, I've not really understood it. But there's what is known as the CVQ, Caribbean Vocational Skills Qualification. This approach more prepares the child for the world of work. Okay? And they need to know how to synergize, incorporate CVQ into the school systems. So those children, because I myself am just completing my CVQ at level 4. Okay, and you can get CVQ up to the master's level. The level 4 that I'm doing is up to the bachelor's degree. You can go anywhere around the world with your so whatever skills that you have. I may not be good academically, but I can learn to read and write.
But I thought that was where, and we're running out of time, so we'll have to go revisit that. But I thought that was where the comprehensive schools were going with that, because that's where the comprehensive schools had all the technical subjects, and you've had the colleges, the convents, didn't have those technical subjects. And maybe we need to revisit
but
the education.
And the TVET, and how, because Boys Training Center has implemented CVQ. And look at one of our boys, I still say our boys, have just graduated up to level 2 now of the CVQ. And the boys are better able to do the CVQ than the academics, because CVQ is
You don't have all that,
competency.
and you don't have
and
the
they're
pressure.
learning the skills, and there's so many things that you learn. So by the time you live there, you're ready for the job market. But when you have all them 9, 10s, CXCs, and A levels, you're not ready for the job market.
Final comments with regard to the overall,
Yes.
the overarching topic that we're.
Wow, this topic was really comprehensive. I'm happy that you've brought it to start again the conversation in terms of protecting our children. I was happy that you looked at the basic human rights of children, let people understand it, and I hope there's a further bring human services people, because this is something we need to discuss and to help people in the communities in how we as a community can protect our children, how we can make our families more resilient, how we can try to diminish the vulnerability and risk factors of individuals, families, and our society, and to make St. Lucia a better and safer place for everyone. And I think this is the goal what we're looking at. We protect our children, maintain the integrity of parents and adults and society, to make our country a better and secure place where everybody can feel happy.
Thank you so much, Callistus, for being here with us. As usual, great conversation. And then for those of you who called, great participation. And I didn't even get a chance this evening to look at my WhatsApp platform or emails, because the conversation was flowing, and I hope you got a lot of information. Remember, every November, on the 20th of November, we celebrate World Children's Day. But World Children's Rights and the celebration of children and awareness among children about themselves is not just a one-day thing. It's an everyday thing. Try to always bear in mind. I know sometimes we may forget, because we've had so many years and decades of marginalizing children and treating them that they're less than human. But let us try every day to observe at least one children's rights. Just one. I'm not asking you to look at all 54 articles or even all 4 broad headings of children's. Just one. If we start with one, that is the first step to acknowledging children as human beings with basic rights that we take for granted and not use them as our whipping post. Children also have rights. Until next time, adieu.
What happens now?